What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. This is one that I am very excited to make because player analysis is always fun, but I'm a strategy guy at heart. I love playing games and trying to solve the optimal strategy using game theory and just finding different and unique ways to win. And at the end of the day, that's what fantasy is, right? It's just one big strategy game. So we're going to continue our Sunday Underdog series this week by talking about my favorite underdog strategies, my tips for you all in these tournaments, and who knows, maybe someone watching this video is going to be able to take down Best Ball Mania 3, one of these puppy drafts, win themselves $1 million. Because Underdog is nice enough to sponsor these new Sunday videos, because remember, we did not have Sunday videos before this, please make sure to go over there, show them some love, sign up for an account today. I've had an absolute blast playing Underdog this summer, and I promise you'll have fun as well. If you're signing up for your first account, just use promo code FFA. They're going to match your first deposit up to $100. That means that you can deposit $100 for the entire summer. They'll turn it into $200. And then you can enter up to 40 puppy drafts. The puppy, like 3 or 4, whatever, is opening up on August 1st. So that's the day after this video gets released. You can enter 40 of those. That's plenty of drafts to get you through the entire summer. And since many of you have already signed up for access to my website, you can just upload my Underdog specific rankings directly to the site, and that'll give you the best chance of winning. I know some of you are apprehensive about playing on Best Ball, but I promise you'll have a ton of fun doing these drafts, and you'll be able to join us as well on the Tuesday night live streams because we do Underdog then. So now that you are all hopefully convinced to sign up for Underdog, let's talk about some strategy. If you've joined my live streams, then you know that my two favorite builds are the 2-4-10-2 build and the 2-4-9-3 build. These two fit my personal drafting style the most, and they're the most common build that you can make naturally if you're going off of like our general strategy. For those of you who are newer to Underdog, what that means is 2 quarterbacks, 4 running backs, 10 wide receivers, and then 2 tight ends, and then the one that was 9-3 is 9 wide receivers, 3 tight ends. You just turn one of those wide receivers into a tight end. This build basically exclusively comes from like hero RB builds. I've heard it called bimodal running back builds or robust, and that's just 1, 2, or 3 early running backs. And the premise is pretty simple as to why this build kind of works. The high-end running backs have a floor and a ceiling combination, at least a potential floor and ceiling combination, that pretty much no one can match. If they hit, some of these high-end running backs can be someone who you know every single week is going out there and getting 15 to 17 points as their floor with the potential to score 30. And that's not something you can typically say about many other positions besides quarterback. Quarterback's just different. Obviously, quarterbacks have a much higher floor, much higher ceiling at times. At least they can hit their 30-point ceiling more often than many of the running backs. But the basic idea is that these high-end running backs are so much more likely to hit that than the late-round running backs. So you want to just load up on a few of them. If you can hit, you can predict the ones that have that really consistent floor, that continually hit their upside. You don't need to have a ton of them. You can use those extra spots in the draft to load up on a higher variance position in wide receiver. And since we also love the talent on so many of the mid-round wide receivers, again, it sets up nicely for our strategy of, I like the running backs early. I like the wide receivers middle. I can figure out other positions at other times. It's just very natural for us to go about this build. So that's why I typically land on this build. And it's especially powerful when we consider the value of having many different wide receivers in best ball. Wide receiver is a more volatile position than running backs, so the benefit of assembling more of them is stronger. We're going to take a look at last season to kind of highlight why this is the case. Let's look at T. Higgins and Adam Thielen last year, 2 mid-round wide receivers. They finished 18th and 23rd in overall points, 13th and 14th in points per game. But if you basically simulate a best ball season between just the two of them, so every week you just take the number one score between these two wide receivers, you end up with the wide receiver 6 overall. So think about that for a second. You combined the wide receivers 18 and 23, and it gives you the wide receiver 6. So you could assemble a ton of these mid-range wide receivers, and then it makes up for not drafting one earlier on. If you do this in redraft, it's different. If you have a bunch of mid-level wide receivers, you can't just combine them in a redraft league to make one stud. That's not how it works. But in best ball, it is how it works, because you're just taking the top score every week. You don't have to figure out who it's going to be. And so if you have a bunch of them, whenever they have these spikes, you are capturing it, whereas you're not necessarily doing so in redraft. And it's easy to think, well, okay, why can't I just do this for running back? But my point here is that you can't, or at least it's tough to do so. If you combine the running backs 18 through 25 in ADP last season, combine all of them, you get the running back 3 in points per game. And that's really good. But that's with combining 8 running backs with an ADP in rounds 4 through 6. And the best combination of those two would have ranked 5th in points per game, which is good, but the remaining 27 combinations, so among all those mid-round running backs, the different combinations of 2 of them together, none of the other 27, so one of the combinations finishes 5th in points per game, none of the other 27 would crack the top 10. That's not very fantastic. Compare that to wide receiver, and things look very different. The wide receivers 20 through 27 by ADP, which match the ADP of the running backs 18 through 25, and still includes busts. Julio's in this group, Brandon Ayuk from last season's here, Jerry Jeudy from last season, Claypool, all of those are in this grouping. So I didn't just pick a grouping that has a billion great wide receivers. But despite those busts, the best 2 combinations finished just behind Cooper Kupp's historic season, and 16 of the 28 total combinations finished inside the top 10, including 4 of the 7 Brandon Ayuk builds. And that becomes stronger when we consider, again, I didn't cherry pick the sample size. I did not include Cooper Kupp, Chris Godwin, Deebo Samuel, Antonio Brown, mid-round wide receivers who very clearly hit last season. I didn't even include them in the sample, and it becomes absolutely insane. And think about what I said a few seconds ago. 4 of the 7 Brandon Ayuk combinations, who did nothing to start the year, still finished inside the top 10 when you just combine them with one other mid-range wide receiver. Combining mid-range wide receivers in Underdog gives you elite wide receiver seasons, and that's why it's optimal to take a bunch of them middle. The data says you should be drafting 5 to 6 of them in rounds 3 through 10. That is insane. That's why you see these huge runs at wide receiver, and it's why you shouldn't just be shying away from these big runs at wide receivers. People kind of understand, well, I just got to grab a bunch of them in the middle rounds, and it's going to give me high performances. And then you consider, okay, well, that fits the build too, because if I can grab these running backs early, I can grab a ton of the middle and make up for the high end. Now I have high-end running backs with simulated high-end wide receivers, and I'm figuring out the other positions after that. So how can you kind of finish off your draft using this general strategy? Tight end is the main driver here. I like tight end early builds a lot, and I actually think that fewer people are going to go for it this season because we only have 2 years of data on Underdog, and last season's the one that people look at the most, and we didn't really see early tight end win out last season. We saw more 3 tight end builds kind of win. We saw mid-range tight end builds win, but that was just because a lot of the early tight ends last season either like neutrally performed, I guess you could kind of say Kelsey neutrally performed, or kind of busted. We're still good, but weren't fantastic. But had Kelsey gone off last season, Waller gone off, Kittle gone off, then it would have been a different story. And I think a lot of these early tight ends are set up really, really well this season. And so when people are looking at the data and like, oh, have to draft 3, oh, early didn't work out that great, well, they're not considering that's like a 1-year sample. So I do like early tight end builds a lot, and they naturally build in to the setup of 2 quarterbacks, 4 running backs, 10 wide receivers, and then only 2 total tight ends. Because if you draft from the top 5, so that's Kelsey, Andrews, Pitts, Waller, and Kittle. That's the top 5. If you draft one of them, just draft 2. You have to assume that they're going to work out. You're not taking down a huge tournament if you draft Travis Kelce and he has a bad season. Like, you're just not going to win anyways. So just assume that he has a good year and only draft 2. I have seen cases, if you want to join Best Ball Mania 3, you want to join a puppy, and you only want to draft one of like Kelsey, Wall. I would say the top 5 is fine, but I would probably only do it with like Kelsey, Andrews, and Pitts. But if you want to do it with Waller and Kittle, I think it's fine. Only draft one of them. Know that you're taking a 0 in at least 1 week. But basically know that like if they have this like league winning season and you can advance, well, then they go off in the playoffs. Like, you're at an advantage if they're being the tight end that scores points for you in every single playoff week, and you can make it to the playoffs with only one, then it has some upside. It's a unique build. We're going to talk about unique builds to close the video. I've seen a case for that. I typically don't do it, but if you wanted to in these really large field tournaments with like, $1 million at the top at 400,000 people entering, you gotta do something different, right? And so I think there's a case for it there, but most of the time, again, you take one early, you take 2 total. If you don't take one early, I typically will lean away from the mid-round tight ends because that's where I want wide receivers. It's where I want some of these great quarterbacks. And so take one early and then one late, or just take 3 late. Those would be the 2 things I would do for tight end. And then quarterback, honestly, like you're just trying to find like a really solid stack. So maybe there's a mid-round quarterback. Maybe you took like, I don't know, Jerry Jeudy or Cortland Sutton, and you want to stack them with Russell Wilson, go for it. You took Lamb early, you want to take Dak, go for it. You took Evans, you want to take Brady, go for it. I would never reach too much in order to do this, but if you want to reach a few spots, that's totally fine. It's really just about finding that stacking partner, and stacking is relatively important, so I would make sure you're doing that. And also only 2 quarterbacks. So I've seen some people argue that you should have 3 because it kind of helps you with that floor and ceiling. But at the end of the day, again, we're trying to win. And so someone else in the tournament that you've entered, let's basically just say you have 3 quarterbacks that helps you advance, right? But if we're trying to win at the end, the very final week, someone else is going to have the same quarterback that you end up using in your starting roster, but they'll have only drafted 2. So you have 3 quarterbacks, and let's just say you drafted Justin Herbert, and he ends up having like 40 points in the final week. And so you use Justin Herbert as your quarterback in that last week. Well, someone else also drafted Herbert, obviously, and they only drafted 1 other quarterback. And so now you have 3, they have 2, they're ahead. They have an extra draft spot ahead of you. And so maybe drafting a 3rd quarterback can help you advance. But if we're trying to win, it just really limits your ceiling. So you're going to want that extra spot. And the data even says, as far as like points scored, like unless you're getting that 3rd quarterback at like 2.5 rounds of value, just don't do it. So 2 total quarterbacks, I would pretty much just exclusively stick with that. But again, it doesn't really matter where you take it. I'm fine early, I'm fine middle, I'm fine late. I'm fine if I have Mac Jones or Daniel Jones. I'm fine taking Tua and Mac Jones, like something like that. Like, I don't really care where the quarterbacks ended up coming, as long as you're getting them as part of a stack. You're not reaching too much, and you're not reaching for that stack. And also, there are different ways that these stacks can come together. Like, you don't need to have Diggs and Josh Allen. You could have Josh Allen along with Gabriel Davis, with Dawson Knox, with Shakir, with Crowder, with McKenzie. Like, there's always other players you can do. So if you happen to be in a range where you're trying to complete a stack and you see someone coming up and you're like, oh, I got to reach around because I have to get the stack, there'll be another opportunity, even if it's just like a late round wide receiver or a late round quarterback to complete the stack with. You don't need to be overly aggressive and reach, because realistically, again, we're trying to win. And so there's going to be a team, if you draft Mike Williams and Herbert. Do you know how many teams in all these different tournaments also drafted Mike Williams and Herbert? Well, guess which one's going to perform better? The one that got him into value. Not you, who drafted Mike Williams and then reached around ahead to make sure you got Herbert. If you end up doing that, like, you're not going to win because other teams got both of them at a big discount and they're way ahead of you. They're just going to end up having a better team. So Always, always, always go for these stacks, but don't mess up your team and reach a bunch in order to complete them because someone else didn't and they're going to beat you. And I think that point is a good transition into like how we're going to close this video. And that's, don't be afraid to be different. Like I said to open this, you're trying to win these tournaments and it's relatively unlikely that you just outpick everyone. You have to be different in some way. As I said, I love the 2-4-10 2 build and the 2-4-9-3 build because it fits my strategy. It allows me to cycle through all these wide receivers. I think it's a very, very strong team. But a lot of people agree with me. A lot of people are going to have that build. And a lot of people, honestly, given how many drafts there are just going to get luckier than you. They're going to get the same players, but someone else fell like 2 rounds later than they should, and they just have a better team because they got lucky. What you need to look out for is how is your draft different from everyone else? And sometimes it's just not going to be. But what if something wild happens in your draft? What if you have the ability to draft Kelsey and Andrews because you got a late second round pick and for some reason Kelsey fell and then Andrews for some reason fell after that, like no one wants these tight ends, and you've now got like an early running back with Kelsey and Andrews. A build that you were never going to go in with, might not say is optimal over time, but is unique, and not many teams are going to have that. Or what if Josh Allen and Mahomes both just crater for some reason, you get both of them at a discount? Or what if no one wants to take wide receiver early and you can get like Justin Jefferson with Stephon Diggs with, I don't know, Mike Evans, like just 3 absolute studs. If something unique happens in your particular draft, you have to take advantage and build a unique lineup as a result. Because like I kind of said, the odds that you can just outdraft tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of people is pretty small. But if you can get a roster construction that very few people have, then it unlocks the possibility that that particular build ends up being what's needed in the championship. What if Kelsey and Andrews in week 17 just go nuclear? They both drop 35 fantasy points. High-end wide receivers have like an okay week, but no one's really spiking. And now those are like the top 2 wide receiver like flex scorers. And you have one in the tight end spot, one in the flex. Not many people are competing with that build. You've got a chance of winning $1 million because of how unique your draft was. And there's not many people competing with you because how many drafts is it even possible to get both of them? That's what you want to look out for. So if something weird is happening, don't be like, well, Nick said to do a 2-4-10 2 build, so that's what I'm going to do. Everyone's doing that. Someone's going to beat you. Someone's going to get better value. But if something weird happens and you're like, this player's never available at this spot, and it's kind of a funky lineup build, but figure out how to make it work for you, that's how you have a best chance of winning these tournaments. So those are the biggest tips that I have for you guys playing on Underdog. Again, I highly recommend you sign up for an account. I cannot tell you how much fun it has been doing these drafts this summer. And if you sign up for your first account today using promo code FFA, they will match your first deposit up to $100. Take full advantage of that. Get yourself into 40 of the puppy drafts that will be opening up on August 1st. It gives you a really strong pool of teams that you can have to try and take down these tournaments. And if you sign up for access to my site already, well, then you can very easily just upload my rankings directly to Underdog in seconds and draft with my rankings already loaded up on the site, which is incredibly valuable. So I'll be back tomorrow, another episode of Mock Draft Monday, Tuesday night, live 8 p.m. Eastern, to do an Underdog draft, talk about latest news out of camp, answer any questions you guys have. And then Wednesday will probably be some sort of strategy video, but I'm not 100% sure on that one just yet. That, my friends, is the end of this one. Hope you all enjoy. If you did, how about hitting the like button? And how about subscribing to the channel if you're new here? Thanks for watching.